Ravala had always believed she understood patience better than most members of her species. As a scout of the Luminaria calm, thoughtful race known for careful study, she had been trained to wait, watch, and notice details others ignored. Yet as she crouched behind a low ridge of smooth, pale stone, she realized that watching one human might test even her long-practiced discipline. The planet, called Outpost That-9 by humans, was quiet in a gentle way. Soft sunlight washed across its flat plains, and faint breezes shaped tiny spirals in the thin dust. Nothing on the world felt aggressive. Even the occasional tall plants, pale blue and slow-moving, seemed to sway with polite curiosity. It was the sort of environment Ravala usually liked, still, predictable and full of space to think. But she wasn't here to enjoy anything. She was here to watch a human. His name, according to her mission briefing, was Evan Hale. He was an engineer assigned alone to this outpost for routine inspection of communication towers. It was not a mission of strategic value. It was not a site of conflict or importance. It was simply a human doing simple human tasks on a simple, quiet world. Her leaders believed this assignment would be easy, except the moment she arrived. Ravala felt something off. Evan's small camp was positioned neatly at the base of an old hill formation. A silver tent-like shelter rested near a portable generator. Tools were arranged in careful rows on a foldable table. Evan himself moved calmly across the work area with the quiet confidence of someone who enjoyed order. His motions were smooth, relaxed, almost rhythmic. He worked with a kind of gentle focus that Ravala found oddly pleasant to watch. There was nothing threatening about him, nothing unusual. He hummed softly sometimes, or paused to check data on his wrist device. Everything about him said ordinary, and yet her scanner told a different story. Ravala silently brought her multi-sensor device closer to her mask. The screen flickered, showing him, and something else, faint signatures that drifted near him like small waves of heat. They were too light to classify, too unstable for identification. At first, she had thought it was an error, but she had calibrated the device twice now, and the strange readings remained. They were always near Evan's camp, always shifting, always present. They were not caused by the wind, or the sunlight, or the structure of the ground. They were something separate, something that shouldn't be there. For 2 hours she watched, trying to understand. Evan never reacted to the invisible shapes. He never looked over his shoulder. He never spoke to them. He acted entirely alone, but the shapes moved. Sometimes they stayed behind him, pulsing softly in her scanner. Other times they drifted ahead of him, as if scouting the path. Once, when Evan bent to pick up a tool, 3 faint shapes flickered into visibility on her screen at once, then vanished again the moment he stood up. Ravala lowered her device and tried to remain calm. "What are you doing, human?" she whispered. Though her voice was soft, the wind quickly carried it away. The Luminari did not view humans as dangerous, but they did view them as unpredictable. Humans adapted quickly, changed rapidly, and often did things that made little sense at first glance. They were surprising in ways that sometimes worried the Council. But Evan did not look unpredictable. He looked peaceful, focused, ordinary. Yet nothing about the readings near him felt ordinary. Ravala shifted slightly out of the sunlight, keeping the ridge between her and the human. Her slim silver cloak blended almost perfectly with the soft sand. She placed her gloved hand against the ground to steady herself. She loved gathering information. She disliked situations she could not categorize. Her mission instructions had been simple: observe the human, confirm his activities, ensure no unusual interference from the environment, report her findings. She doubted the Council had expected this. She adjusted her mask's visor for sharper magnification. Evan now knelt near one of the communication towers, examining the base connection. His brown hair shifted lightly in the breeze, and he lifted his head now and then to check readings on a small handheld scanner. His expression remained calm, but behind him there, again a faint shimmer, barely visible, almost like heat rising from stone. But it moved deliberately, and then it faded. Ravala tried to steady her breathing. She was not easily alarmed, but the unexplainable always made her cautious. Her people valued knowledge, and she felt uneasy when she didn't have any. She checked her sensor again. Still there. Still no classification. Still no idea what it meant. She pressed a small button to record the data, though she suspected her superiors would not take it seriously. The council often dismissed unusual readings as equipment malfunctions, unless physical proof accompanied them. She sighed quietly. She wished she could step closer, but approaching a human directly without permission risked misunderstanding. Humans could be startled easily in foreign environments, and she did not want to disrupt his mission or her own, so she stayed where she was, halfway hidden by the ridge, watching, thinking, measuring. For a moment, nothing happened. Evan worked. The wind blew. The planet remained silent and calm. Then something changed. Evan paused mid-motion. He lowered his tools slowly and looked not at his equipment, not at his scanner, not at any visible thing, but at the empty air beside him. His head tilted slightly, as if listening to something Ravala could not hear. The faint shapes on her scanner brightened. Ravala's breath caught. Was he communicating with them? Did he sense them after all? Was the human pretending not to notice until now? Evan nodded slowly at empty space, and returned to his work, as if nothing odd had occurred. The shapes dimmed. Ravala sat completely still for a long moment. She felt a strange mix of tension and curiosity growing inside her. Her people rarely behaved impulsively, but she felt a sudden urge to walk up to the human and ask directly. That thought alone startled her. She had never wanted to break protocol before. She forced herself to remain still. She was a scout, she observed. She did not interfere unless necessary, so she spent the rest of the afternoon watching carefully. She watched him repair a loose connector. She watched him organize his tools. She watched him check atmospheric readings. Everything remained peaceful, and yet the strange heat-like shapes never left his side. When Evan finally returned to his shelter as the sun lowered toward the horizon, Ravella began recording her preliminary report. Her voice stayed steady, but her mind felt full of questions. "This is Scout Revela of the Luminari Exploration Unit," she began quietly. "Subject, human engineer Evan Hale. Activity, routine structural maintenance. Observation quality, stable." She paused, hesitating before continuing. "Secondary observation. Multiple unidentified energy signatures detected near the human's location. Patterns are inconsistent but persistent. No visible forms detected. No direct interaction recorded." She hesitated again. "Possibility of sensor error, moderate. Possibility of unknown environmental phenomenon, moderate. Possibility of human involvement, unclear." When she finished her recording, she lowered the device and looked back at Evan's camp. The lights of his shelter glowed warmly against the darkening sky. For a moment, Ravala simply watched the quiet scene. Humans were always full of surprises. But this was something she could not have predicted, as she prepared to settle into her own small shelter behind the ridge. She took one last glance at her scanner. The human was inside his tent. Still calm, still alone. But the faint shapes outside his shelter had multiplied. From 3 to 5 to 7, they seemed to stand around his shelter. Spaced evenly like silent watchkeepers, Ravala stared, unable to look away. The human wasn't alone. Not at all. Something unseen watched over him. Something she did not understand yet, and she had a feeling this mission would be far more complicated than anyone expected. Ravola did not sleep much that night. Luminari needed very little rest compared to humans. But even the short period of quiet she usually allowed herself refused to come. Her mind kept returning to the same image, the 7 faint shapes circling Evan. Hale's shelter like silent sentinels. She had watched them for nearly an hour, as the sky faded from orange to deep violet. They had not moved aggressively. They had not drifted close to the human. They simply remained near his shelter, spaced with perfect symmetry, almost as if guarding him. Guarding. Or observing. Ravola could not tell which possibility unsettled her more. By morning, the shapes had faded from her scanner. Only the human remained, stepping out of his shelter with a tired stretch and a small yawn. He started his generator again and prepared a meal packet while checking data from the communication towers to him. Everything seemed normal to Ravala. Nothing felt normal. She rose from her hidden place behind the ridge and activated her cloak to match the sand more carefully. Her body hardly made a sound as she moved a few steps closer, though still maintaining safe distance. Her people believed in patience and caution. She would not break those principles now. Evan finished his meal, cleaned his hands, and opened his portable toolkit. Today he appeared focused on the tall central tower, an older model, rusted at the base. He walked toward it with relaxed steps. Ravala lifted her scanner again. At first, the screen showed only Evan. His height, his energy levels, his movement, everything looked perfectly ordinary. Then, slowly, small flickers reappeared. First 2, then 4, then 6. Ravala exhaled quietly. They were back. The shapes were clearer now, forming faint outlines like shifting pockets of warm air. They hovered around him at different distances, appearing and disappearing in gentle pulses. Every time Evan paused to check his readings, the shapes paused. When he moved, they followed, matching his pace, almost like companions. Ravala rubbed her thumb over the edge of her scanner. She considered the possible explanations. A malfunction? Unlikely. She had recalibrated 3 times. A natural phenomenon? Perhaps, but natural patterns did not mimic motion so precisely. Human technology. But the shapes had no stable structure. They did not match any known human device. Something else. Something she had never studied? Her mind circled through possibilities without finding answers. Evan moved around the tower, humming quietly to himself. At one point, he lifted his head toward the open sky, as if thinking about something far away. Then he returned to his work with calm determination. But the shapes around him brightened slightly, as if reacting to his change in mood. Ravala stiffened. Were they sensitive to him? Were they connected somehow? Evan did not seem afraid. He did not hide anything. He worked with relaxed movements, as if unaware he was surrounded by strange energy signatures. Ravala shifted her weight. Trying to understand, her people studied energy forms, often natural fields, atmospheric waves, magnetic currents. But these readings did not belong to any known category. They were too organized, too purposeful. She needed to get closer. Not too close, just close enough to sharpen the readings. Silently, Ravala slid along the ridge, staying low and keeping her cloak aligned with the environment. She moved with slow, careful steps until she reached a new position, closer to the base of the hill. Only 20 meters from the human. Her scanner's image sharpened instantly. There were 8 shapes now, 8 faint, energy-bright distortions surrounding him. Ravala felt her pulse quicken. One of the shapes drifted ahead of Evan, brushing close to the tower's metal frame. The structure vibrated softly, almost as if responding to the shape's presence. Evan looked up at the noise, but did not seem alarmed. He simply examined the vibration, nodded to himself, and continued tightening a connector. HFY felt more confused than before. Why did he not react to the presence she saw so clearly? Could only her technology detect them? Or did humans sense things in a different way? She stared for a long moment before switching her scanner to audio extension mode. It did not capture ordinary sound. Her ears could do that. Instead, it translated energy frequencies into soft electronic tones, so her mind could notice patterns. The faint shapes produced sound. Gentle, low hums. Stable, calm, rhythmic, not hostile, not random. A pattern almost like a steady heartbeat. Ravala froze. Energy forms with repeating patterns usually meant structure. And structure meant intelligence of some kind. Were these beings alive? She watched Evan again. He wiped sweat from his forehead and stepped back to study the panel he had just fixed. Then he spoke softly, his voice light and thoughtful. I think that should hold. For a few days, he murmured, HFY. Leaned forward slightly. He was alone and yet speaking. Anyway, unless you guys think I missed something, he added. Almost jokingly, Ravala's breath caught. He was talking to them. He just wasn't looking at them directly. Evan waited quietly for a second, as if listening for a reply. But of course, no reply came that she could hear. Still, his expression softened slightly, almost as if reassured. Then he went back to his work. Ravala felt a wave of curiosity stronger than anything she had felt in months. The human was not afraid. The shapes were not aggressive. Whatever relationship existed here was long-standing or natural. Her report needed to be more detailed. The council needed to understand this. She lifted her recorder. This is Scout Ravala. Continuation of previous observation. I have confirmed repeated appearance of the unidentified signatures. Their movement patterns are coordinated and appear to respond to the human's actions. Unknown if the human is aware of their exact nature, he communicates verbally at times, though context is unclear. She paused. Recommendation. Continued observation required before conclusions can be made. Her voice remained calm, but her thoughts were anything but calm. Evan finished with the central tower and returned to his camp to check the morning's data. The shapes followed. All 8 shifted around him in graceful arcs, then settled into loose positions near the shelter. Ravala adjusted her cloak again and stayed hidden. Time passed slowly, filled only by work sounds, metal tapping, device beeping, sand shifting under Evans's boots, and always the shapes were there. Sometimes one shape drifted close to the generator but quickly moved away, as if avoiding the heat. Another sometimes stayed above Evan's shoulder height, watching movements from a higher angle. The rest floated near his feet or behind him. Ravala observed everything. Midday came, and Evan took a short break, leaning against the shade of his shelter. He drank from a water container and then paused, looking at the air beside him. No, I'm fine, he said quietly, smiling slightly. Just a little tired. Ravala felt her heart jump. He was communicating. He did sense something, maybe not their exact shapes, but their presence. Then Evan lifted his wrist device and checked the time. I'll fix the northern tower next, said to no one visible. It won't take long. He stood, stretched, and headed toward the north edge of the outposts. The shapes moved with him. Immediately, Ravala hesitated only a moment before following from a safe distance. She stayed low, moving carefully across the sand as the wind picked up. Her scanner continued showing the faint forms drifting around. Evan, they moved like a group trained to stay together, precise but gentle, coordinated but calm. As they reached the new tower, one of the shapes suddenly flickered more brightly. Evan sensed something and paused. What is it? He asked softly. He listened. Ravala watched. The shape dimmed again. Evan nodded as if understanding, then approached the tower with a more focused expression. Ravala stared in disbelief. This went beyond coincidence, beyond imagination, beyond any known environmental effect. The human wasn't alone, not even for a moment. Something unseen walked with him, something protective, something watchful. Ravala felt a shift inside her, part worry, part wonder. Whatever was happening here. This mission was no longer simple, and she had no idea what she would discover next. Ravala followed at a careful distance as Evan walked toward the northern tower. The sun had climbed higher, warming the sand until tiny reflections shimmered across the ground. This part of the outpost was quieter than the rest. The wind dipped lower here, trapped between broken ridges and uneven hills. Evan seemed used to the silence. He walked with relaxed steps, one hand lightly touching the strap of his tool bag. But Ravala was not focused on him right now. She watched the shapes. They drifted in gentle arcs around him, almost like a ring of floating lanterns set invisible to the naked eye and only visible to her scanner. Every time he slowed down, they slowed down. Every time he stopped, they hovered still. Their patterns were too coordinated to be random, but today, something in their movement felt different. They were closer to Evan, more alert, their pulses stronger and brighter on her scanner. As if preparing for something, Ravala moved behind a cluster of tall stones and crouched, adjusting her cloak. She kept her steps slow and quiet. Her breath came steady, her hands calm, but inside she felt a flicker of tension. Evan didn't know she was there. The shapes did. She felt certain of that now. Each time she moved, the faint outline nearest her brightened slightly, almost like noticing her presence. But it never moved toward her. They only stayed near Evan, protecting him. The northern tower stood beside a steep ridge, half covered in shadow. The metal structure reached high above the ground, with thin wires stretching upward like vines. Evan paused in front of the tower and looked upward. "Looks stable enough," he said softly. One of the shapes drifted forward and brightened. Ravella watched closely. Evan followed its direction. Turning his head slightly left, he paused, frowned lightly, then walked toward that side of the tower. "Ah," he said with quiet surprise. "Loose bracket." He bent down and inspected it carefully. Ravalla's pulse quickened. It had guided him. The shape had shown him where to look. He trusted it without needing to see it. Were humans naturally sensitive to these energy forms? Or was it only Evan? Ravella leaned forward just slightly, shifting her weight to get a clearer view. That was when it happened. A soft vibration passed through the ground beneath her fingertips. So light at first that she wondered if it was her imagination. Then it came again stronger, a gentle tremor rolling through the sand like a wave. Evan stopped working. He straightened slowly, his expression alert. He listened. Turning his head toward the ridge behind the tower, Ravalla's eyes widened. "He's facing my direction." The shapes brightened instantly around him. All 8. Their pulses grew sharper, almost crisp, as if waiting for something. 2 drifted closer to Evan's sides, hovering like shields. Ravalla stayed perfectly still. The tremor came again, this time more clearly. A deep, low vibration rising from beneath the earth. Ravalla touched the sand lightly. It felt like something shifting far below. Not dangerous, not destructive, just moving. Evan stepped back from the tower. He looked around slowly. "Is something wrong?" he asked the empty air. The shapes brightened again. One shape suddenly moved directly toward the ridge. Directly toward Ravalla. Ravalla held her breath. The shape drifted closer, flickering softly, growing more defined. Ravalla couldn't see it with her eyes, but her scanner displayed its glowing outline moving toward her position. She remained crouched, hardly daring to move. When the shape reached the ridge, something unexpected happened. It brushed against her cloak. Ravalla felt nothing physically, no impact. No force, but the scanner flashed, showing a sudden burst of light around the contact point. Her breath caught in her chest. The shape sensed her. It recognized her presence. Her heart raced not from fear but from shock. She had not expected contact. She had not expected the beings to react so. Directly, Evan reacted instantly. He turned sharply toward the ridge and took 1 step forward. "What happened?" he asked quietly. The shapes around him shifted, almost as if murmuring. Ravalla remained frozen. She had to decide quickly, stay hidden or retreat. But retreating would make noise. Staying still might cause the shapes to investigate further. Her mind raced through her training. Luminary scouts avoided contact during early observation. She was not prepared for direct interaction yet. Evan took another step. He looked toward the ridge again. "I felt something," he murmured. "HFY Vala?" His heart pounded. Had he felt the shape touching her cloak? Or had he felt her presence? She slowly lowered her scanner to avoid reflection. She needed to stay calm, needed to wait after a moment. Evan exhaled softly and relaxed his shoulders. "Probably nothing," he said. But he didn't sound convinced. The shape that had moved toward Ravalla drifted back to Evan's side. Its glow softened, returning to normal. Evan watched it for a moment, then nodded slightly. "You're right," he said quietly. "Let's finish the tower." Ravella blinked behind her mask. Did the shape communicate? Had it reassured him? Her mind overflowed with questions. She waited several minutes before moving again. Only after Evan turned his attention fully to the tower, she retreated a few steps behind the ridge, keeping her cloak steady. And her scanner dimmed, but she could not stop thinking about what just happened. The shape had touched her, and Evan had reacted. He did not know what had caused the disturbance, but he sensed it. Maybe not with sight or sound, maybe with instinct. Maybe he was more connected to the shapes than she had realized. Ravala resumed her observation as Evan worked on the tower. He tightened the bracket, checked a panel, and read data from his wrist device. The shapes remained close, forming a half-circle around him, but now Ravala watched with new understanding. They were not wandering energy. They were not environmental anomalies. They were not human machines. They were guardians. She studied their behavior more carefully. Each one seemed to have a role. One hovered higher, observing from above. 2 stayed near Evan's sides, always close. 3 remained behind him, forming a steady arc. The rest moved gently around the perimeter, scanning the environment. They watched everything, including her, as the sun lowered behind the ridges. Evan finally stepped back from his work and nodded in quiet satisfaction. "That should do it," he said. He packed his tools and glanced around thoughtfully. "We should head back. Before it gets dark," he added. The shapes shifted with him, moving in unison as he began walking back toward the main camp. Ravala followed once again, silent as shadow, but her thoughts were louder than ever. This was no ordinary phenomenon, no simple discovery. This was something far deeper. Evan walked calmly, unaware of the storm of questions building inside the Luminary scout watching him. As he reached the top of a small ridge, he paused for a moment and looked out across the quiet plains. "I know," he said softly. "I feel it too." Then he continued walking. Ravala froze. Who was he talking to? The shapes brightened as they drifted around him. She watched the scene in stunned silence. Humans were not supposed to have companions like these. Humans were not supposed to walk with silent guardians. Humans were not supposed to sense scout-level stealth. And yet Evan did. Ravala's mission had changed. This was no longer simple observation. This was discovery, and she had a feeling the truth was far more complex than she imagined. Ravala followed at a steady distance as Evan returned to the main camp. The sky above Outpost That-9 shifted slowly from bright gold to soft blue as the sun lowered behind the plains. Long shadows formed across the ground, stretching between ridges like quiet rivers of shade. Evan walked calmly, humming a small tune under his breath. His steps were relaxed, but the shapes around him were not. On Ravala's scanner, they glowed brighter and moved more sharply than before. They stayed closer than she had ever seen them. Something had changed. Perhaps it was the tremor earlier. Perhaps it was the moment when one shape brushed against her cloak. Perhaps it was the way Evan had sensed something near the ridge. Whatever the reason, the shapes were now alert. Ravala kept her movements slow and careful. She stayed behind a wide stone outcrop as Evan reached the edge of his camp. He placed his tools on the table, checked his generator, and then scanned the day's repair data on his wrist device. His expression showed calm satisfaction. "That went better than expected," he murmured. But one of the shapes pulsed brighter, catching his attention. Evan paused. "You think so too?" He smiled slightly. "Good. Then tomorrow, we finish the last tower." He continued organizing his equipment. Ravala watched every tiny detail. The more she observed, the more she felt certain. The shapes did not just follow him, they communicated with him. He responded to their movements and their quiet energy presence, even if he did not see them. She needed answers. She needed a clearer view. She waited until Evan entered his shelter to review his data logs. Then she began moving slowly along the ridge until she reached a place where she could observe the camp from a closer angle. Her scanner flickered with stronger readings. Then she saw something she had not seen before. The shapes were clearer. They still did not appear directly to her eyes, but the scanner now displayed their outlines with striking detail. Each form looked like a tall figure, smooth, rounded shapes that resembled armor without sharp edges. They were made entirely of energy, glowing faintly with soft waves of light. Their faces were blank, but peaceful. Their movements were calm, patient, and strangely gentle. Ravola felt a shiver of awe. They were not chaotic forms, not natural anomalies, not random energy, they were beings. She zoomed the scanner further. Each figure had a Cora-bright center, pulsing with steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat. Like a source of life, Ravola swallowed slowly. The human race had been in space for only a few generations. They had no known energy-based allies. No recorded connections to such beings. Nothing in Luminar records suggested humans could attract guardians like these. So why Evan? Why here? Why now? She needed more data. Ravola moved silently along the ridge until she reached a higher vantage point overlooking the canyon behind Evan's camp. This canyon stretched long and narrow, with tall, curved walls and soft purple light reflecting off smooth stone. Evan often used it as shelter during storms. Today the wind blew lightly through it. Carrying a faint echo, she crouched near the top and observed below. Evan stepped into the canyon, holding a small sensor tablet. He was scanning the rock wall surface for mineral data. He walked slowly along the canyon floor, stopping to inspect cracks or touch the stone lightly. But Ravala's attention was not on him. It was on the shapes. Inside the canyon, they looked different. The narrow rock walls seemed to concentrate their energy outlines, making them more visible on her scanner. Their silhouettes pulsed like soft lanterns beneath the shadows. One floated slightly above Evan's head. 2 walked gently at his sides. 3 more formed a loose arc behind him, and 1 drifted a few steps ahead like a guide. Ravola felt her breath catch. They were guarding him. Truly guarding him. Their positions were too perfect, too deliberate. They behaved like trained protectors, silent, watchful, always aware of him. Suddenly, the leading shape brightened strongly on her scanner, Evan noticed. He paused mid-step. Something ahead? The shape pulsed again. Evan stepped forward carefully, his expression thoughtful instead of alarmed. He examined the canyon wall where the shape hovered. The air shimmered faintly. A crack in the structure, he whispered. Thanks. Pulled out a small device and marked the weakened area for later analysis. Ravola stared in amazement. The Guardians were helping him with his work. Not just protecting, assisting. This made no sense. Why help a simple human engineer? Why follow him so faithfully? Her heart beat quietly, but rapidly. She felt a mixture of excitement and confusion. Her people valued understanding, logic, and knowledge. But this situation defied all predictable patterns. Evan moved further down the canyon, and Ravola followed from above as he reached a wider open spot where the canyon split into 2 paths. The Guardians suddenly stiffened. Their glowing outlines sharpened on her scanner. All 8 moved into a tight formation around him, 4 in front. 4 behind, Ravola froze. Something had triggered them. Evan felt it too. His shoulders tensed slightly, though he kept calm. Is something wrong? He asked softly. 1 Guardian brightened sharply, a warning. Evan listened to the silent energy around him. He stepped back slowly, not taking the left path, not taking the right. Ravola checked her scanner at the far side of the left canyon path. Beneath a shadowed ledge, something pulsed faintly. A small energy disturbance. Not dangerous, but curious. Perhaps an unstable mineral pocket. Perhaps shifting rock. But the Guardians reacted strongly to it. Too strongly, Evan took another cautious step backward. It's fine, he said softly, almost reassuringly. We'll go around. The Guardians dimmed slightly but stayed close. He turned back toward the main canyon, walking in slow, careful steps. The Guardians moved with him like a quiet wave of light. Ravola followed silently along the ridge. When Evan finally reached the mouth of the canyon, he let out a slow breath. You're always looking out for me, he whispered. I appreciate it. 1 Guardian pulsed brightly in unmistakable reply. Ravola felt a gentle chill. They understood him. Not just reacted, they understood. She had seen enough. She needed to organize her findings and send a detailed report. But she also needed to be completely sure, before presenting information so unusual. As Evan returned to his shelter, Ravala stayed hidden behind a tall stone pillar. The guardians resumed their usual positions. Floating gently around the camp like calm stars, Ravala recorded her thoughts. This is Scout Ravala. I have confirmed that the unidentified shapes are structured, intelligent energy beings. Their behavior suggests protective intent toward the human. HFY. They appear sensitive to environmental changes and guide the human's decisions. They respond to his voice and movement. They communicate through energy pulses. Their presence remains unexplained. She hesitated. Recommendation: continue close observation. Do not approach directly. Further evidence needed. She ended the recording and sat in silence. For the first time in many cycles, she felt the weight of discovery, a deep, powerful feeling that something important was unfolding before her. Something that might change how her people understood humans entirely below. Evan stepped out of his shelter again, looking at the evening sky. The guardians formed a gentle ring around him, glowing softly. He smiled, peaceful and unaware of the significance of this moment. Ravala watched with wide, thoughtful eyes. Humans had always been considered ordinary, but HFY, he was never alone. And the truth behind these guardians was only beginning to reveal itself. Ravala waited on the canyon ledge long after the storm had passed. The sky above the desert world had turned clear again, shining with soft silver stars. But Ravala was not looking at the sky. Her attention was fixed on the camp below, where the human, HFY, sat beside a small heater unit. The warm light painted an orange ring around him. But Ravala knew that he was not alone inside that ring. The guardians were there too, invisible to most eyes. Hidden from almost all sensors, silent, patient, watchful, but she had seen them now, true outlines, faint but clear. They moved like figures made of energy and memory. They formed a circle around him with absolute loyalty, yet they never looked at one another. They only focused on Evan. She still did not understand why. When she had first begun spying on the human, she'd expected to discover some machine or secret Earth technology. She had thought the shadows were drones or stealth units. But now she knew the truth. They were not tools, and they were not following Evan because of commands. They were there because of something older, something connected to humans in a way she could not yet explain. Ravala felt small for the first time in many years. She tried to breathe calmly, but her thoughts kept spinning. If all humans have these guardians, what does that mean for the galaxy? What does that mean for her people? Would they fear humans? Respect them? Avoid them? She needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them. She stood, took a breath, and stepped down from her hiding spot. Evan notices HFY had been staring at the sky too, lost in thought, when he suddenly felt a soft chill travel across his skin like a gentle signal from somewhere nearby. The guardians stirred. They did not glow, but he sensed their movement. The same way a person might sense a shift in air pressure before a storm, then he heard it. A small rock tumbling down the canyon path. Evan stood up slowly. He did not reach for a weapon. He simply waited. Ravala appeared at the base of the ridge. Walking carefully, her hands open to show she carried nothing dangerous. Her cloak rustled softly as she stopped a few meters from him. The guardians tightened around Evan at once, visible but unmistakably present. Evan raised a hand slightly, signaling he was calm. Ravala felt her throat tighten. She had seen many warriors in her life, but none like this human. He did not look powerful. He did not try to intimidate her. Yet he stood with complete confidence, protected by beings older than any war in her history. "Hello," Evan said quietly. Ravala swallowed. "You knew I was watching?" "Yes," he answered honestly. "Not at first. But recently, yes." Ravala nodded once. "I am sorry. I had orders." "I did not mean harm, I know," Evan said. He hesitated, then added, "You were careful. Very careful." She blinked. The compliment surprised her, but the guardians were not fooled. Though they made no sound, Ravala felt their warning clearly, like a warmth pressing gently but firmly against her armor. They wanted her to keep her distance. Evan glanced around where they stood. even though he could not see them clearly with his eyes. "They won't hurt you unless you try to hurt me," he said. "I understand," she whispered. The question she must ask for a moment, the canyon grew quiet again. Only the wind moved between them. Ravala finally gathered courage. "Human, Evan." "What are they?" Evan looked thoughtful. "I don't fully know," he admitted. "Humanity discovered them long ago, but we still don't understand everything." "Are they machines?" she asked. "No." "Are they alive?" "Maybe in a way that we don't have a word for." Ravala stepped closer, only one small step. The Guardians reacted instantly, their shapes tightening. Evan lifted a hand again, calming them with a small gesture. Only then did he continue speaking. "They appear when humans are in danger," Evan said. "Not always. Not for everyone. But often enough that people know the stories." "Stories," Ravala repeated. "Yes, some cultures on Earth call them protectors. Others call them ancient companions. Some believe they respond to human emotion. Others think they are tied to human life energy." He shrugged lightly. "My people have many theories. But they follow you," Ravala said. Evan smiled softly, almost sadly. "I didn't choose them. They chose me." Ravala's breath caught. Chose him. If the Guardians chose humans, that meant humans were not just protected. They were connected to something powerful. "Why you?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered. Ravala's dilemma. Vala lowered her head for a moment. Her mind raced through all the consequences. If she reported the truth exactly as she saw it, her leaders might panic. They might try to study humans more aggressively. They might try to hide from them. Or worse, they could attempt to control or capture one, hoping to understand the Guardians. That would be a mistake. A dangerous one. She lifted her eyes to look at Evan. "I must tell my leaders," she said quietly. "It is my duty. But I worry they will make a wrong choice." Evan did not look upset. "What choice?" Ravala explained slowly. "Some may see you as a danger. Not because of anything you did, but because of what surrounds you." Evan nodded. "I understand," Ravala continued. "Others might want to study humans. That could lead to fear. Fear leads to mistakes. I do not want a conflict." Evan studied her face, seeing the worry she tried to hide. "You don't want harm for your people," he said gently. "No," she answered at once. "And I do not want harm for yours." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Evan asked something unexpected. "Ravala, what do you want to do?" She blinked. "Me?" "Yes, not your leaders. Not your orders. You." It was the first time someone had asked her that so directly. She took a slow breath, thinking carefully. "I want to understand," Ravala whispered. "Not as a spy. Not as an enemy. I want to know what these Guardians truly are. Why they follow humans? And why they appeared around you." Evan exhaled, thoughtful. "I don't know if I can give you all the answers," he said honestly. "But I can share what I know. And you can see for yourself. Will your Guardians allow that?" she asked. Evan glanced around the invisible ring. "They will not allow harm," he said. "But they will allow truth." Ravala's chest felt lighter. A new understanding. Evan stepped aside, giving her a clear area where she could sit without stepping inside the Guardian's circle. Ravala sat quietly. Evan sat across from her on the other side of the heater unit. The small flame between them flickered gently, casting warm light across the canyon walls. Ravala watched as a faint shimmer moved near Evan's shoulder, one of the Guardians adjusting its position. Evan noticed her gaze. "Would you like to try something?" he asked. Ravala nodded carefully. "Close your eyes," Evan said. She did. "Now breathe slowly. Focus on the space around you." Ravala followed the instruction. For a moment, she felt nothing unusual. Then a warm, steady pressure brushed gently against her thoughts, like a greeting from something not physical. Not a voice. Not a shape. Just a presence. She opened her eyes sharply. Evan smiled. "You felt it." Ravala nodded, stunned. "They greeted me." "Maybe," Evan said. "Maybe they were curious, Revola felt awe rise inside her. It's not fear, not tension. Ah. She realized then that the Guardians were not tools of war. They were beings of purpose. They protected humans. Yes, but they were not hostile to others unless threatened. She understood something important in that moment. Humans were not powerful because of technology. They were powerful because the universe itself had chosen to place these guardians near them, and that meant humans were not alone. Not truly. The choice of Rivalis stood slowly. I will tell the truth to my leaders, she said softly, but not in a way that creates fear. I will explain that your guardians defend, but they do not attack without cause. Avon nodded. I think that's fair, Rivala added, and I would like to return. Not as a spy, as a friend, to learn more, if you will allow it. The Guardians reacted a soft ring of warmth, spreading outward. Rivola felt it clearly. It was not a warning. It was approval. Evan smiled. I would like that too. She stepped back toward the canyon path, preparing to return to her people. But she paused, turning one last time. Evan, she said, I saw you alone many times, but you were never truly alone. Evan looked at the Guardians around him and then back at her. None of us are, he said gently. Ravella nodded, her heart steady. She left the canyon with a new purpose, and with the knowledge that her discovery would change the future of both species. Humans had guardians, and now, perhaps they also had allies.